I woke up to the sound of something wet splattering against my bedroom window at 2 in the morning, and when I threw back the curtains, all I could see were 3 dark figures sprinting across my lawn toward the street. This was the 4th night in a row, and I was absolutely done with it. My name is Andrew Jackson, and I had moved into this quiet suburban neighborhood in Scottsdale, Arizona, just 6 months ago. The house was perfect, a single-story ranch with a well-maintained yard, close to my job as an IT consultant. Everything had been peaceful until about 2 weeks ago when the egging started. At first, I thought it was just random teenagers being stupid, but the persistence of it made me wonder if something else was going on. I went outside in my pajamas and slippers to survey the damage. Yellow yolk dripped down the front of my house, mixed with bits of shell. My gray siding was completely coated, and the smell was already starting to get bad in the warm Arizona night. This was going to be a nightmare to clean in the morning, especially since egg dries like concrete in the desert heat. As I stood there with my phone's flashlight, trying to see if they had hit my car too, my neighbor's porch light flicked on. Gerald Martin lived next door, a retired accountant who had been nothing but friendly since I moved in. He shuffled out in his bathrobe, shaking his head. "Again," he called over. "4th time," I replied, feeling the frustration building in my chest. "I am seriously considering camping out here with a garden hose." Gerald walked over to the fence separating our properties. "You know, you might want to be careful. Patricia Whitmore has been on a warpath lately with the HOA stuff. She has been sending violation notices left and right." I had met Patricia exactly once at a neighborhood barbecue. She was the HOA president, a woman in her late 40s with that specific haircut that seemed to be standard issue for people who enjoyed making others miserable. She had spent 20 minutes lecturing me about the proper shade of beige for mailbox posts. "What does that have to do with someone egging my house?" I asked. Gerald shrugged. "Probably nothing. Just saying, be careful how you handle this. She has a way of making things worse." I thanked him and went back inside, but I could not sleep. The anger was keeping me wide awake, along with the nagging feeling that this was not just random vandalism. Someone was targeting my house specifically. My other neighbors were not getting hit, just me. The next morning, I spent 3 hours scrubbing egg off my siding with a mixture of hot water and dish soap. My arms ached, and I was sweating through my shirt by the time I finished. As I was coiling up the garden hose, a white SUV pulled up to my curb. Patricia Whitmore stepped out, clipboard in hand, wearing a polo shirt with the neighborhood HOA logo embroidered on it. "Good morning, Andrew," she said, her voice dripping with false cheerfulness. "I am here to conduct a routine property inspection." "Right now," I gestured at my wet siding. "I just spent all morning cleaning up vandalism." Her eyes narrowed behind her designer sunglasses. "Vandalism? Have you filed a police report?" "Not yet. It has been happening for a few nights now. Someone keeps egging my house." Patricia made a note on her clipboard. "Well, that is unfortunate, but I need to inform you that your lawn is currently 1.5 inches above the maximum allowed height according to HOA regulations. You have 48 hours to remedy this violation or face a fine of $50. I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. "My lawn is fine. I mowed it 3 days ago. The regulations are very clear. 2 inches maximum." She tore off a yellow violation notice and handed it to me. "Also, your garbage bins are visible from the street. They need to be stored in your garage or behind a privacy fence at all times when not in use for collection. They are on the side of my house. You can barely see them. The regulations state they must not be visible from any public right-of-way." Another violation notice. "Additionally, Your window treatments are not uniform from the exterior. All windows facing the street must have white or off-white treatments. Are you serious right now? The frustration from the sleepless night and the egging was bubbling over. Someone is vandalizing my property and you are worried about my curtains. Patricia's expression hardened. The HOA exists to maintain property values and neighborhood standards, Mr. Jackson. I suggest you review your covenant documents. You signed them when you purchased the property. Good day. She walked back to her SUV, leaving me standing in my driveway with 3 violation notices and a growing suspicion that I had somehow ended up on her bad side. I had no idea what I had done to deserve this level of scrutiny, but I was determined to find out. That evening, I drove to the hardware store and bought 4 high-definition security cameras with night vision capabilities, along with 2 powerful motion-activated floodlights. If these vandals wanted to keep egging my house, I was going to catch them on camera. I spent the next few hours mounting cameras at each corner of my house, positioning them to cover my entire front yard and driveway. The floodlights went up on either side of my garage, bright enough to light up half the street when they activated. I was on a ladder adjusting the last camera when Gerald came out to check on me. "That is quite the security system," he observed. "If they come back tonight, I will have them on video in full color," I said, climbing down. "Then I can file a proper police report with evidence." Smart thinking. Just be prepared for Patricia to have something to say about those floodlights. Let her complain. I have a right to protect my property. Gerald gave me a sympathetic look. "You are not wrong, just giving you a heads up." She made the Hendersons take down their Christmas lights because they were 3 days past the HOA deadline. She actually measured their yard with a tape measure to prove their decorations extended 2 feet past the allowed boundary. That is insane. That is Patricia. He headed back toward his house, then paused. "For what it is worth, I hope you catch whoever is doing this. This used to be a nice, quiet neighborhood." That night, I kept my phone on the nightstand with the security camera app open. The system would send me a push notification if any of the cameras detected motion. I must have checked it a dozen times before finally drifting off around midnight. At 1:45 in the morning, my phone buzzed loudly. Motion detected on the front yard camera. I grabbed it and watched as 3 figures approached my house from the street, carrying what looked like cartons of eggs. The moment they stepped onto my lawn, the floodlights erupted with brilliant white light. The effect was instantaneous. All 3 vandals froze like deer in headlights, literally shielding their eyes from the sudden brightness. I could see them clearly now, 3 teenagers, probably between 15 and 17 years old. One of them was holding a full carton of eggs. Another had his arm cocked back ready to throw. I was already out of bed and heading for the front door. By the time I threw it open, they had recovered from their shock and were running, but not before I got a good look at their faces. More importantly, my cameras had recorded everything in crystal clear high definition. "I've got you on camera," I shouted after them. "All of you." They disappeared around the corner and I went back inside to review the footage. The cameras had captured everything perfectly. I could see their faces, their clothing, even the logos on their jackets. One of them was wearing a Letterman jacket from Desert Vista High School, which was about 2 miles from the neighborhood. I saved all the footage to my computer and backed it up to cloud storage. Then I sent the files to my phone. First thing in the morning, I was going to the police. But before I could even have my coffee the next day, there was a sharp knock at my door. I opened it to find Patricia standing there with 2 other people. A thin man in his 50s wearing khakis and a polo shirt, and a heavyset woman with a severe expression. "Mr. Jackson," Patricia began, We are here representing the HOA board. We have received multiple complaints about your new lighting installation. Complaints? From who? I just installed them last night. The thin man spoke up. I am Richard Chen, HOA treasurer. Your floodlights are in violation of the Neighborhood Light Pollution Ordinance. They exceed the maximum allowed lumens for exterior residential lighting. They are motion-activated security lights. Someone has been vandalizing my property. The heavyset woman consulted a tablet. I am Susan Morrison, HOA secretary. According to our Architectural Review Committee guidelines, any exterior modifications, including security systems, must be approved in advance. You did not submit the required application. I could not believe what I was hearing. So you are telling me I cannot protect my own house from vandals without HOA approval? You are telling us you need industrial-grade floodlights, Patricia countered. Your lights woke up 4 different families last night. Children were crying because they thought there was an emergency. They were motion-activated. The only reason they went off is because 3 teenagers were trespassing on my property to egg my house, which I have on video, by the way. That made them pause. Patricia exchanged glances with the other board members. You have video evidence, crystal clear. Faces, clothing, everything. I am going to the police this morning to file a report. Richard cleared his throat. That is your right, of course. However, the floodlights still need to come down or be replaced with compliant fixtures. You have 24 hours. And the cameras? I asked, already knowing the answer. Need architectural approval, Susan said. Please submit Form ARC-7 with photographs and specifications. The committee meets once a month. So I just have to let people vandalize my property for a month while I wait for approval. Patricia's smile was cold. You should have thought of that before making unauthorized modifications. Good day, Mr. Jackson. After they left, I sat in my kitchen staring at the pile of violation notices. I now had 5 of them, and they were threatening daily fines if I did not comply. But I was not backing down. I had evidence, and I was going to use it. The Scottsdale Police Department was professional and helpful when I showed them the footage. The officer who took my report, Officer Davis, was a young woman who seemed genuinely concerned about the vandalism. This is excellent footage, she said, watching the video on my phone. You can see everything. Do you recognize any of them? No, but one is wearing a Desert Vista High School jacket. That is helpful. We can probably identify them pretty quickly. She took down all my information and gave me a case number. We will follow up within a few days. In the meantime, keep your security system running and document any additional incidents. The HOA is trying to make me take it down. Officer Davis frowned. The cameras. Cameras and the floodlights. They say I need approval. Well, I am not a lawyer, but you have a right to security measures on your own property. I would suggest talking to an attorney if they push it. We see this sometimes with HOAs. They care more about aesthetics than actual safety. I thanked her and left, feeling slightly better about the situation. At least the police were taking it seriously, even if the HOA was not. 2 days later, Officer Davis called me back. Mr. Jackson, we have identified the 3 suspects from your video. They are all students at Desert Vista High School. We have contacted their parents and the school resource officer. 2 of them have already admitted to the egging incidents. That is great news. What happens now? Well, because they are minors and this is property damage under a certain threshold, it will likely be handled through juvenile diversion. They will have to pay restitution for the damage and cleaning costs, perform community service, and they are facing disciplinary action at school. Their parents are pretty upset, from what I understand. What about criminal charges? The county attorney will review the case. but typically first-time juvenile offenders in property damage cases get diverted if they cooperate and make things right. However, if you want to push for charges, that is your right as the victim. I thought about it. I just want it to stop and I want them to pay for the damage. I am not trying to ruin these kids' lives. That is fair. I will put that in my report. Someone from Victim Services will reach out to you about restitution. And Mr. Jackson, good job with the security system. Made our job a lot easier. I hung up feeling vindicated. The system had worked. I had caught the vandals and they were facing consequences. Now I could finally relax and get back to normal life. Except the HOA was not done with me. That afternoon, I found a certified letter in my mailbox. Inside was a formal notice that I was being fined $200 for failure to comply with the lighting and camera violations. Additionally, they were fining me $50 per day until the issues were resolved. The letter stated that if the fines exceeded $1,000, they could place a lien on my property. I immediately called the number on the letterhead. Susan Morrison answered. "This is Andrew Jackson. I just got a notice about fines and a potential lien on my property. This is ridiculous. I was protecting my house from vandals. Mr. Jackson, we sympathize with your situation, but rules are rules. The HOA covenants are legally binding. You agreed to them when you purchased your property. I caught 3 teenagers on camera egging my house. The police have identified them. Does that matter at all to the HOA? We are glad you were able to resolve your vandalism issue. However, that does not change the fact that you installed non-compliant exterior lighting and security cameras without approval. The board is willing to expedite your architectural review if you submit the proper forms. How long will that take? Emergency reviews can be completed within 2 weeks if all materials are properly submitted. So I am supposed to rack up fines for 2 weeks while you review whether I can have security cameras. You could remove the non-compliant fixtures and reapply when you have approval. That is not happening. Someone vandalized my property 4 times. I am not taking down my security. There was a pause. Then I am afraid the fines will continue to accrue. You should also be aware that the board is considering additional action for creating a hostile environment in the neighborhood. A hostile environment. I am the victim here. Your confrontational attitude with board members and your refusal to comply with regulations is disruptive to neighborhood harmony. Several residents have complained about your aggressive behavior. I had never been aggressive with anyone except for yelling at the vandals as they ran away. This was absurd. Who complained? That is confidential. Have a good day, Mr. Jackson. She hung up, leaving me furious and confused. Something was seriously wrong here. The HOA was targeting me and I could not figure out why. I decided to do some research. I pulled up the HOA covenant documents that I had barely glanced at when I bought the house. They were 73 pages of dense legal language, but I started reading. Most of it was standard stuff about lawn maintenance, exterior modifications, and quiet hours. But as I read deeper, I noticed something interesting. The section on fines stated that the HOA could assess penalties, but they had to provide written warning and an opportunity to cure the violation before fines started accruing. They had given me violation notices, but the fines had started immediately without giving me the required cure period. I also found a section about the appeals process. Any homeowner could appeal HOA decisions to the full board, and they were required to hold a hearing within 30 days. I had rights here, and the HOA was not following their own rules. I drafted a formal appeal letter that evening, citing the specific covenant sections they were violating. I requested a full board hearing and demanded they suspend all fines until the hearing took place. I sent it via certified mail and email to every board member whose contact information I could find. 2 days later, Gerald knocked on my door. He looked uncomfortable. "Hey, Andrew, got a minute?" "Sure, come on in." He stepped inside but did not sit down. "Look, I probably should not be telling you this, but you seem like a decent guy and this whole situation is getting out of hand." "What is going on?" "Patricia has been talking to some of the neighbors. She is trying to build a case to have you removed from the neighborhood." "Removed? Can she even do that?" "Technically, if someone is in continuous violation of the covenants and refuses to comply, the HOA can force a sale of the property. It is in the documents way in the back. It almost never happens, but it is possible." I felt my stomach drop. "You are kidding." "I wish I was. She has been showing people photos of your floodlights and telling them you are bringing down property values. She is making it sound like you are running some kind of fortress with searchlights and razor wire." "I have 4 cameras and 2 motion lights. That is it." Gerald nodded. "I know. I tried to tell some folks that you were just dealing with vandals, but Patricia has a way of spinning things. She is also apparently related to one of the kids who was egging your house." That stopped me cold. "What?" "Brandon Whitmore. He is her nephew. His mom is Patricia's younger sister. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that the police contacted his parents. Patricia is apparently furious that you are pressing charges against him." Suddenly, everything made sense. The timing of the HOA violations, the aggressive fines, the hostility. Patricia was not enforcing rules. She was retaliating because I had gotten her nephew in trouble. So this whole thing is personal revenge. "I cannot prove anything," Gerald said carefully, "but the timing is suspicious. You might want to document everything. Save all the notices, keep records of your interactions with the board. If this goes legal, you will want evidence." "It is already legal. They are threatening to lien my property." "Then you definitely need a lawyer. I know a guy who handles HOA disputes." "Want his number?" I took the contact information gratefully. After Gerald left, I called the attorney, Michael Ramirez, and explained the situation. He listened carefully, asking questions about the timeline and the specific violations. "This sounds like selective enforcement and possible retaliation," he said when I finished. "The fact that she is related to one of the vandals is important. That is a conflict of interest. She should have recused herself from any decisions regarding your property." "Can you help me?" "Absolutely. First thing we do is file a formal complaint with the board about Patricia's conflict of interest. Then we are going to tear apart their fines and liens. If they are not following their own procedures, which it sounds like they are not, those fines are invalid. I will draft something today and send it over for your review." "How much is this going to cost me?" "My retainer is $1,500. Depending on how far this goes, could be anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 total. But if we win, which I think we will, we can seek attorney's fees from the HOA. They are supposed to carry insurance for this kind of thing." It was a lot of money, but I did not see another option. I agreed to his terms and wired the retainer that afternoon. By the next morning, Michael had sent a 10-page letter to the HOA board outlining all the ways they were violating their own covenants and state law. He CC'd me on the email, and I had to admit, it was beautiful. He methodically dismantled every fine, every violation notice, and every threat they had made. He also explicitly called out Patricia's conflict of interest and demanded she recuse herself from all matters related to my property. The response came within hours, but not from the board. Patricia called me directly, which surprised me. "Mr. Jackson, this is Patricia Whitmore. I just received a very concerning letter from an attorney claiming to represent you." That is correct. Michael Ramirez is my attorney. This is completely unnecessary. We can resolve this situation without lawyers getting involved. Really? Because last time we talked, you were threatening to lien my house. The board is willing to suspend the fines if you agree to modify your security system to meet our requirements. We are trying to be reasonable here. I am the one being reasonable. I installed security equipment because my house was being vandalized by your nephew. There was a long silence. I do not know what you are implying, but Brandon is a good kid. You have no proof he was involved. Actually, I have high-definition video of his face and the police have his confession, so I have plenty of proof. This conversation is over. Any further communication will go through the board. She hung up, and I immediately called Michael to tell him about it. He told me to write down everything I remembered from the conversation while it was fresh. 3 days later, I got another certified letter. This one was from the full HOA board, not just Patricia. They were scheduling my appeal hearing for the following Tuesday at 7 in the evening at the community center. I was allowed to bring my attorney and present evidence. The letter was much more formal and professional than the previous communications, which I took as a good sign. Maybe the board was reining Patricia in. Michael and I spent the next few days preparing. He helped me compile all the documentation. The timeline of egging incidents, photos of the damage, the police reports, the security footage, copies of all the HOA violation notices, and the payment records for fines I had been forced to pay to avoid the lien. We also had Gerald willing to testify about the selective enforcement and Patricia's comments about her nephew. The night of the hearing, the community center meeting room was surprisingly full. I had expected just the board members, but there were at least 20 neighbors there. Some I recognized from around the neighborhood, others I had never seen before. Patricia sat at the head of the table with Richard and Susan on either side. 4 other board members I had not met were also present. Michael and I sat at a small table facing them. He had his laptop ready with all our evidence queued up. Patricia called the meeting to order. We are here tonight to hear an appeal from Andrew Jackson regarding violations and fines assessed against his property at 4782 Desert Willow Drive. Mr. Jackson, you have 30 minutes to present your case. Michael stood up. Thank you. Before we begin, I need to address a serious conflict of interest. Mrs. Whitmore, is it true that Brandon Whitmore, one of the juveniles who vandalized my client's property, is your nephew? The room went silent. Patricia's face flushed red. That is a personal matter and has no bearing on HOA business. It has every bearing when you have been the primary person assessing violations and fines against my client. You have a clear conflict of interest. Under both your HOA bylaws and Arizona law, you should have recused yourself from any decisions regarding Mr. Jackson's property. Richard leaned over and whispered something to Patricia. She looked furious but nodded. Fine. I will recuse myself from this matter. Richard will chair the hearing. She stood up and moved to a seat in the audience, glaring at me the whole time. Richard took over, looking uncomfortable with the sudden promotion. Mr. Ramirez, please proceed. Michael spent the next 20 minutes walking through the timeline. He showed the security footage of the vandalism, including clear shots of Brandon Whitmore's face. He presented the police reports and the confirmation that all 3 juveniles had confessed. He then showed the timeline of HOA violations, noting that they had all started within 24 hours of the first police contact with Brandon's parents. The pattern here is clear, Michael argued. My client was the victim of repeated vandalism. He took reasonable steps to protect his property. In response, Mrs. Whitmore began a campaign of harassment and retaliation, using her position in the HOA. She assessed violations that other homeowners in this neighborhood are not being held to. She issued fines without following the required notice and cure periods in your own covenants. And she threatened to lien his property, all because he had the audacity to report her nephew to the police for committing a crime. He pulled up photos on his laptop. These are pictures I took this morning of other houses in this neighborhood. This house has security cameras visible from the street. This one has floodlights brighter than my client's. This one has a lawn at least 3 inches tall. This one has garbage bins visible from the street. None of these homeowners have been cited for violations. This is textbook selective enforcement. The board members were looking at each other uncomfortably. Several of the neighbors in the audience were whispering. I could see Patricia in the back, her arms crossed, looking like she wanted to murder someone. Richard cleared his throat. "Mr. Jackson, do you have anything to add?" I stood up. "Just that I moved here 6 months ago because this seemed like a nice, quiet neighborhood. I have been a good neighbor. I maintain my property, I follow the rules, I do not cause problems. When teenagers started vandalizing my house, I did what any reasonable person would do. I installed security equipment and reported them to the police. I should not be punished for being a victim of a crime. And I definitely should not be harassed by the HOA president because one of those teenagers happens to be her nephew." Richard nodded slowly. "The board will deliberate and provide a decision within 5 business days. This hearing is adjourned." As people filed out, several neighbors came up to me. A woman in her 60s shook my hand. "Good for you," she said. "Patricia has been abusing her power for years. It is about time someone stood up to her." An older man nodded in agreement. "She fined us $500 because our Christmas wreath was the wrong shade of red. Said it was not traditional enough. This HOA has become a nightmare." I thanked them and left with Michael. In the parking lot, he put a hand on my shoulder. "That went well. The board knows they are on shaky legal ground. I would be surprised if they do not void all your fines and violations." "What about Patricia?" "That is up to the other board members. But if they have any sense, they will ask for her resignation. She has opened them up to serious liability." 4 days later, I received a letter from the HOA. It was signed by Richard Chen as acting president. The letter stated that after careful review, the board had determined that the violations and fines assessed against my property were invalid due to procedural errors. All fines were voided, and any payments I had made would be refunded. My security cameras and floodlights were approved retroactively. The letter also stated that Patricia Whitmore had resigned her position as HOA president effective immediately, and that the board would be reviewing all recent violation notices to ensure compliance with their own procedures. I called Michael immediately. "We won." I saw. "That is a complete victory. Congratulations." "You think she will try anything else?" "I doubt it. She is probably worried about personal liability at this point. If she keeps harassing you after this, she could face a lawsuit that her HOA insurance would not cover. She would be smart to just leave you alone." I thanked him and paid his final bill. The whole legal fight had cost me about $4,000, but it was worth it to have my life back. 2 weeks later, I was in my garage organizing some tools when Gerald came over. "Hey, got some news you might be interested in." "What is up?" "Brandon Whitmore and the other 2 kids just got their sentencing in juvenile court. Brandon's getting 6 months probation, 100 hours of community service, and he has to pay you restitution. The other 2 got similar deals. Plus, all 3 are suspended from school for the rest of the semester and they are off the baseball team." "How do you know all this?" Gerald grinned. "My wife volunteers at the school. Word travels fast. Apparently, Brandon's mom is furious at Patricia for how she handled everything. She blames Patricia for making it worse by trying to retaliate against you through the HOA. There is some serious family drama happening over there. I almost feel bad. Do not. Those kids committed a crime repeatedly. They need to face consequences. And Patricia brought this on herself by abusing her HOA position. I had to agree with that. Over the next few weeks, things slowly returned to normal. My security system stayed up without any complaints. I maintained my property and followed the actual rules, not the made-up ones Patricia had been trying to enforce. The new HOA president, Richard, turned out to be reasonable and fair. He even apologized to me personally for how the situation had been handled. About a month after everything settled down, I was checking my mail when a beat-up Honda pulled up to my curb. Brandon Whitmore got out, looking nervous. He was a lanky kid with shaggy brown hair and acne, wearing a t-shirt and gym shorts. "Mr. Jackson," he called out tentatively. I walked over, curious. "That is me. I am Brandon Whitmore. I wanted to come by and apologize for the egging and everything." Up close, he looked younger than I had expected, just a kid who had made some stupid choices. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "What did I ever do to you?" He shuffled his feet, not meeting my eyes. "It was not about you, really. My friend Tyler, his older brother, told us about this neighborhood and said it would be funny. We were just messing around at first. Then it became like a thing, like we had to keep doing it to prove we could. You could have stopped after the first time. I know. I am really sorry. My parents are making me pay for all the damages out of my own money. I have been working at my uncle's landscaping company every day after school and on weekends to earn it back. Plus, I got kicked off the baseball team and I am probably not getting into Arizona State now because of the suspension." I could see genuine regret in his face. He was not just sorry he got caught. He understood that he had screwed up and was facing real consequences. "Look, Brandon, I appreciate you coming by. That took guts. You made some bad decisions, but you are young. You can bounce back from this. Just learn from it and do not do stupid stuff like this again." "I won't, I swear. And I am really sorry about my aunt, too. I did not know she was going to go crazy on you with the HOA stuff. My mom is not even talking to her anymore because of it." "That is not your fault. That was all her." He nodded, looking relieved. "Okay. Well, I just wanted to say sorry in person. My probation officer said it would be good for me to take responsibility." "It is good. I accept your apology. Good luck with everything, Brandon." He got back in his car and drove away. I stood there for a moment, thinking about how a stupid teenage prank had spiraled into this whole mess involving the HOA, lawyers, and family drama. But at least it had a resolution. The kids were facing consequences, but not having their lives ruined. Patricia was no longer abusing her HOA power. And I had a functioning security system protecting my home. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I saw it was from Patricia Whitmore. "I hope you are happy. You destroyed my reputation and damaged my family relationships, all over some eggs and bruised ego." I stared at the message for a long time, debating whether to respond. Finally, I typed back. "I installed security cameras because someone was vandalizing my property. You chose to retaliate by abusing your HOA position. You made this situation what it became. I was just protecting my home." She did not respond, and I blocked the number. I was done with the whole situation. Over the following months, the neighborhood slowly forgot about the drama. Richard proved to be a fair and reasonable HOA president. He actually amended some of the more ridiculous rules that Patricia had pushed through over the years. The maximum lawn height went from 2 inches to 3 inches. Garbage bins were allowed to be visible from the side of properties. Security cameras were explicitly approved as long as they were not recording neighbors' properties. I became friendly with several of my neighbors who had been quietly suffering under Patricia's rule. Turned out she had been assessing petty violations and fines for years, but no one had ever challenged her because they did not want the hassle. My fight had inspired the board to reform their practices and actually follow their own rules. Gerald and I started having beers on his patio every Saturday afternoon. He told me stories about the neighborhood history, including Patricia's rise to power in the HOA. Apparently, she had moved into the neighborhood about 8 years ago after a divorce. She had channeled all her energy into the HOA, starting as a regular board member and working her way up to president. At first, people appreciated her dedication, but over time, it became clear that she enjoyed the power more than the actual responsibility. She used to be okay, Gerald explained one Saturday, but after she became president, it went to her head. She started treating the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. Anyone who disagreed with her got targeted with violations. Why did not anyone vote her out? Most people do not show up to HOA elections. It is usually just her and a few allies who bother to vote. The rest of us just wanted to be left alone. Maybe that needs to change. Already has. After your hearing, attendance at HOA meetings has tripled. People are paying attention now. Richard is up for re-election next month, and there are actually 3 people running for the open board seats. Real competition. I ended up going to that election meeting. It was packed with homeowners, many of whom I had never seen at any neighborhood event. Richard was re-elected as president by a wide margin. The 3 new board members all ran on platforms of reasonable enforcement and community building, rather than petty rule following. Patricia was not at the meeting, but I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had put her house up for sale. Apparently, the family drama with her sister and the embarrassment of being forced to resign had made staying in the neighborhood uncomfortable for her. I ran into her one final time at the grocery store about 3 months after everything had settled. We ended up in the same checkout line, and there was an awkward moment when we recognized each other. She looked tired, older than I remembered. "Andrew," she said stiffly. "Patricia. I am moving out of the neighborhood next week, bought a condo in Phoenix. I heard. I hope it works out for you." She studied me for a moment. "You know, I was just trying to maintain standards, keep the neighborhood nice. You were on a power trip and you abused your authority. Maybe." She looked away. "Brandon told me he apologized to you." "He did. He is a good kid who made bad choices. He is not the problem. And I am." I thought about how to answer that. You let your personal feelings override your responsibility to be fair. When your nephew got in trouble, you made it about revenge instead of just letting the system work. That is what made you the problem. She did not respond, just paid for her groceries and left. I never saw her again. Life in the neighborhood improved dramatically after Patricia left. The new HOA board focused on actual community building rather than petty enforcement. They organized neighborhood barbecues, a Halloween party for kids, and a holiday lights contest. The atmosphere shifted from everyone walking on eggshells about violations to people actually enjoying living there. My security cameras never caught another incident of vandalism. The floodlights only went off when deer wandered through the yard or when I came home late. It was exactly what I had wanted when I installed them: protection and peace of mind. Brandon Whitmore completed his probation successfully. I heard from Gerald that he had gotten his grades up, graduated high school, and ended up getting accepted to Arizona State after all. He wrote me a letter as part of his probation requirements, thanking me for accepting his apology and not pushing for harsher punishment. He said the experience had taught him about consequences and responsibility in a way that nothing else had. The other 2 kids involved in the egging also got their lives back on track. One joined the military right after high school. The other went to community college and was working part-time at his family's restaurant. According to the juvenile court system, all 3 were considered success stories of the diversion program. About 6 months after the whole ordeal ended, I was doing some yard work when a moving truck pulled up across the street. A young couple with 2 small kids were moving into the house that had been empty for a few months. I walked over to introduce myself. "Hi, I am Andrew Jackson. Welcome to the neighborhood." The husband, a friendly guy in his 30s named Marcus, shook my hand enthusiastically. "Thanks. I am Marcus. This is my wife Jennifer and our daughters Sophie and Emma. If you need anything or have questions about the neighborhood, feel free to ask." "We have got a pretty good HOA now, very reasonable," Jennifer laughed. "That is good to hear. The realtor warned us that HOAs can be nightmares. She mentioned something about the previous president being difficult. That situation got resolved. New board is great. They actually care about making this a nice place to live instead of just enforcing rules." As I walked back to my house, I thought about how much had changed in less than a year. I had gone from being targeted and harassed to being settled and comfortable. The neighborhood had transformed from a place of petty tyranny to an actual community. And 3 teenagers had learned some hard lessons about consequences. The security cameras that had started all the controversy were now just part of the landscape. Several other neighbors had installed their own systems after seeing how effective mine had been. The HOA had even added a section to their website about recommended security measures for homeowners. That evening, I sat on my back patio watching the sun set over the Arizona desert. My phone buzzed with a message from the neighborhood group chat that Richard had set up. Someone was organizing a block party for the following weekend and asking for volunteers to help set up. I replied that I would bring my grill and help with cooking. This was what a neighborhood should be. People looking out for each other, helping each other, building community. Not someone on a power trip using arbitrary rules to make everyone miserable. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondering if she had learned anything from the experience or if she was just bitter about how things had turned out. I hoped she had found some peace in her new condo, maybe learned to let go of the need to control everything around her. The truth was, the whole situation had taught me some valuable lessons too. I had learned to stand up for myself, to not just accept unfair treatment because it was easier than fighting back. I had learned that documentation and evidence were crucial when dealing with authority figures who abused their power. And I had learned that most people, when given the facts, would do the right thing. The juvenile court system had worked exactly as it should. The teenagers had faced consequences that were serious enough to teach them a lesson, but not so harsh that it ruined their futures. They had paid restitution, performed community service, and learned that actions have consequences. That was justice, not revenge. The HOA board had ultimately done the right thing too, once they were presented with the facts and realized the liability they were facing. They had removed a problematic president, reformed their procedures, and created a better system going forward. That was how institutions were supposed to work. Even Brandon's apology, as simple as it was, had shown growth and maturity. He had taken responsibility for his actions in a genuine way, not just going through the motions. That was the kind of thing that indicated he would actually learn from his mistakes. As for me, I had my home, my security, and my peace of mind. The investment in cameras and floodlights had been worth every penny, not just for catching the vandals but for standing up to an abuse of power. The legal fees had been steep, but Michael Ramirez had been worth it. Sometimes you had to spend money to protect your rights. I finished my beer and went inside. Tomorrow, I would start preparing for the block party. Maybe I would make my famous barbecue ribs. It would be a good chance to get to know Marcus and Jennifer better, to welcome them properly to the neighborhood. Life was good. The drama was behind me, the neighborhood was thriving, and I could sleep peacefully at night knowing my security system was watching over my property. No more eggs, no more harassment, no more HOA retaliation. Just normal suburban life in Scottsdale, Arizona, exactly what I had wanted when I bought the house. The security cameras kept recording, the floodlights stayed ready to activate, and the neighborhood continued to grow and improve. Richard proved to be an excellent HOA president, focusing on what actually mattered rather than petty enforcement. The board meetings became productive and well attended. People actually cared about their community again. I became more involved too, volunteering for the Neighborhood Watch program and helping organize community events. It felt good to be part of something positive, to contribute to making the neighborhood better rather than just existing in it. One evening, about a year after everything had settled, I was at a neighborhood barbecue when Richard pulled me aside. "Hey, Andrew, I wanted to thank you again for standing up to Patricia last year. I know it was not easy and it cost you money and stress, but you really changed this neighborhood for the better. I was just protecting my property. It was more than that. You showed everyone that the HOA is not some untouchable authority, that they have to follow rules too. We have had so many positive changes because you were willing to fight back. I appreciated that, but the truth was simpler. I had just wanted to stop someone from egging my house and to not be harassed for taking reasonable security measures. The larger implications had not been my goal, just a fortunate side effect. But looking around at the neighborhood party, seeing families laughing together, kids playing in the street without fear of HOA violations for chalk drawings, neighbors actually talking to each other instead of avoiding interaction, I could not help but feel proud of what had happened. Sometimes standing up for yourself has ripple effects you never anticipated. Sometimes fighting back against petty tyranny creates space for community to flourish. Sometimes one person saying enough is enough changes everything for the better. The teenagers who had egged my house were now young adults starting their lives, hopefully having learned that actions have consequences, but that mistakes do not have to define you. Patricia was somewhere in Phoenix, hopefully finding better ways to spend her energy than harassing her neighbors. The HOA was functioning properly as a tool to maintain the neighborhood rather than a weapon to enforce someone's personal preferences. And me. I was just a guy with a house in Scottsdale, 4 security cameras, 2 floodlights, and a neighborhood that had become a real community. Life was exactly what it should be, peaceful, secure, and free from egg-related vandalism. The end.